All right, so moving on to chapter 16, emotional and social development in middle adulthood. We are now at Erickson's seventh stage, so I've got one more to go. Generativity versus stagnation. So generativity is reaching out to others, looking for a way to guide the next generation. So we're really going to be moving away from focusing on ourselves and instead focusing on children, um, mentees, right? Really giving back and saying, okay, I know stuff, let me help the next generation so they know stuff well also. So commitment extends beyond the self. A lot of times you can become generative just by having kids, but you also can do it through helping with other family members, through your work, mentoring, younger people, mentoring, people coming up in your organization at work. Really anything that you're doing to help others and help those that are younger kind of learn how to navigate life can help us feel generative. The opposite of that is stagnation, where really your own comfort and security is the most important, and you don't really care about other people that much. You're more self-centered, don't have a lot of involvement with other people or young people, not really interested in being productive or having self-improvement. Stagnation's more likely to happen if we didn't find intimacy in the last stage. It's also likely to happen if you don't really have a good sense of identity from the stage before that, from identity versus role confusion. All right, if you never really figured out who you are, maybe you're stuck in that kind of identity foreclosure or identity diffusion of March's stages. Um, and then you don't really find, a good love relationship, you're more likely to kind of end up more stagnant as you get into these older years. All right, so Levinson had a theory which they kind of called the middle adulthood season. I like this. Season. It's just a season. It's seasoning. I'm being seasoned. Um, so Levinson said that between 40 and 45, we go through this kind of midlife transition where we kind of realize that, oh, all right, like I'm pretty much halfway through life now. Like I've done half of my life. And we may feel like there's a sense of time running out. Like, oh crap, I need to get done with these things I haven't done yet. Like I need these things I want to do. I want to make sure I do them. So we may evaluate our early adulthood and decide, like, did I make good choices? Were there things I would have liked to have done differently? And then we may make drastic or small changes. So most people don't make really drastic changes in their midlife because they've, kind of built their life to where it is and are pretty happy with it. But we do see those more drastic changes in those people that were kind of in identity foreclosure back in the day and didn't really get to choose who they were, what they wanted to be. And now that they're, 40 years old, they look back and they're like, you know what? I don't want to do this. I don't like having this job. I'm going to go change jobs. I'm going to change, this. I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to live here. We're going to move. So you're going to be doing more drastic changes if in earlier stages in life you weren't really allowed to be who you were. Then when it is time to kind of say, you know what, here I am. So we also have a good amount of men coming out as gay around this time. We're finally able to say, like, okay, I'm not going to live like this anymore. I'm finally going to live my truth. Bring on the men. All right, so Valiant also has a view of midlife as being that people in midlife are what we call our keepers of meaning and guardians of culture. So they're the people that make sure that, as we move into midlife, the midlifers are the ones who are saying, we need to make sure our cultural traditions are handed off to our kids. We need to make sure that the things that are important within our culture are continued. And, they're kind of also adults in their 40s and 50s carry most of the responsibility for a functioning society. Think about how old are, like mayors, Congress people, like things like that, like CEOs, people running companies, a lot of them are in their 40s and 50s, right, going into their 60s. But 40s and 50s are, where a lot of our society is run by people at this age that have gotten to that level, and that's kind of their responsibility to keep the society running. Passing the torch becomes important, right? Handing it off and saying, okay, you guys now need to learn how to do this. Let me show you, right? So it's that generativity as well. We may start to focus on longer term goals, right? This is what I want to make sure is done before I die. And by kind of making these longer term goals and kind of helping others and keeping the meaning and doing the cultural things, it can make it seem like, things aren't happening so quickly around me, right? Like I have responsibilities, I have things to do, and I'm helping other people, learn how to be part of our culture, which is, a good thing. We want people being able to do that. So, will you have a midlife crisis? Probably not. A midlife crisis has been way overblown in talking about in our culture. It's not a thing that happens to most people. Um, Men are more likely to have a midlife crisis in actual midlife. Women tend to have it more in early adulthood, especially around 30-ish, when they're trying to decide, should I get married? Should I have kids? Kind of, what am I going to be doing here? A sharp disruption in your life is very uncommon, right? When we see people, all of a sudden, oh, it's a midlife crisis. They've, divorced their wife and they've bought a sports car and they've moved to Cancun. Like that's extremely uncommon. Do we see, 50-year-old guys driving sports cars? Yeah. Is it because they're having a midlife crisis? No, it's because they can afford that sports car now. They've wanted that sports car since they were 16. They couldn't afford it when they were 16. But now they've got a 401k and a house that's paid off and they can have their nice sports car, right? Not because they're all freaking out about how they're old. They're just excited they have the money now to be able to do it. So midlife crisis has a lot to do with how much regrets we have. Do we regret a whole bunch of decisions we made in our youth? Then we may decide to make big changes as we get to midlife. Um, if we look back and we're like, you know what, everything I did that's led me to where I am and I'm kind of happy with where I am, then you're not going to tend to have any real, sharp disruptions or crises occur. All right, so factors in midlife psychological well-being. So what does it mean if you're going to, feel good about yourself in midlife? Well, the first thing you need to do is get a friend who is of a different ethnic background as yours, go work out and eat smoothies. The end. Boom, psychological well-being. And maybe do these things as well. Being in good health, right? If you're in good health, you just tend to be psychologically more healthy, right? As your health goes down, you tend to not be as happy. Exercise helps. It releases endorphins, which help us to be happy. If we have a sense of control over our life, right? Do we feel like we are in control? We get to make decisions for ourselves. That helps us have higher well-being. If we're invested in our own life and care about what happens to ourselves, it makes us feel better. If we have good, positive social relationships with our friends, with our family, siblings, that's helpful. Being in a good marriage and having a mastery of all the multiple roles that you play in midlife, all of these things contribute to having a higher well-being as we move through midlife. All right, so coping improvements that we tend to experience as we move onward through our 40s to 60s. We tend to get better at identifying the positive things and not really dwelling on the negative parts of our life as much. We're better at postponing action before we evaluate all of the things. So when we're younger, we tend to be more impulsive, right? Part of that is, until we're 25, our prefrontal cortex not really helping us much there. And we're better at kind of stopping, evaluating, thinking about, what are the good things, pros, cons, before we take action and do something, which is, really helps us in making good decisions. Anticipation and planning skills are just better. We are better at knowing how to plan, how to make sure that we have things in place that we need. Having good humor, right? Being able to laugh at yourself, really not caring what other people think about you as much. Like that's huge. We care so much about what other people think about us and what our look is like, right? Especially now with all the social media and everything. And when you get to be, in your 40s, you're just like, you know what, I don't care, right? You just stop really doing things you don't want to do anymore and laughing at yourself and being like, yep, this is who I am. Oh well, never going to be perfect, and that's okay. Integrating your strengths and your weaknesses, knowing what you're good at, being okay with stuff that you're not great at, improving yourself if you can, where you can. Having more confidence, which also comes with having more experience in doing things. And we tend to be more emotionally stable as we get older, right? We don't have as much drama in our lives when we're older as we do when we're younger, which is nice. So our gender identity, women tend to increase in masculine traits and men tend to increase in more feminine traits. So what happens as we get older is that we move closer to being androgynous. So androgynous is someone, or someone who's androgynous encompasses both what we consider traditional masculine and feminine traits. And people who are more androgynous tend to be happier, have higher well-being, um, and like themselves more. So this doesn't mean that everyone becomes androgynous. It just means androgynous. It just means that we move closer to the middle as we get older. So someone who is like super masculine or super feminine isn't going to become completely androgynous, but they will kind of slowly move in towards the middle of the spectrum. Theories behind this are a decline in sex hormones kind of makes us not have the need to be as feminine and masculine, and also the demands in midlife, right? We don't get to just, do the things that are just masculine or just feminine, right? The guy is going to have to be changing the diapers and maybe making the dinner, and the woman's going to have to maybe change a tire or, go outside and, mow the lawn because it has to be mowed because your, HOA is yelling at you, which they love to do, freaking HOAs. All right, so your relationships at midlife, you're going to have a lot of them. So most people have more close relationships in midlife than they do at any other part of their life. People they consider close. So you think about, where are you at midlife? You're usually married. You usually have kids. So you have this new person who you're married to, then you have these new people that you created, which are kids. Then you still have your own siblings. You have your own parents who are also still usually alive and around. And then you have your siblings' significant others. You have your siblings' kids. You have your kids who may be getting married, and then you have their grandchildren, you have your grandchildren, and then you have in-laws. All right, so you have all these new relationships that happen in midlife, causing you to kind of have more close relationships at that period than any other you've ever had before. You're also going to tend to be launching your children at this age at some point between 40 and 60, which means sending them off into the world, having them leave home. And like I said, but with that comes them finding significant others of their own, bringing them into your family, and you just have a lot of people around you. So if you have a good, solid family life, you tend to have a lot of really good, significant relationships going on between 40 and 60. Marriage and mid-adulthood, we do have a lot of more economic well-being as we get older because we pay things off. We don't have as many, your student loans are hopefully paid off by then. Mine aren't going to be for a while. But, you maybe have your house paid off, maybe you don't have car payments as much, you're making more money, so that's good. There's a lot of time between parenting and retirement, which can allow you to focus on your marriage and just being between the two of you, but still working on your career, which can kind of help your marriage some. Sometimes you review and adjust marriage at this time, so this may strengthen the relationship, but we also see divorce happening in midlife after the kids leave home. Because we have that marital you that I talked about before, where you have high marital satisfaction before you have kids, the marital satisfaction dips as soon as you have your first child, keeps going down until the kids get older, comes back up, and it goes back up to the highest level of marital satisfaction once all the children have left the home. However, some people, after the children have left the home, kind of look around and say, you know what, I don't even know who you are anymore. I was really only here because we had kids together and it's time to leave. So we actually see a big spike in divorce in your late 40s to 50s after the kids have left home, when the marriages have kind of fallen apart, and now they say, okay, well, there's no reason for us to stay together anymore since the kids are gone, let's get divorced. Having a good, strong marriage is highly linked to psychological well-being and feeling good about yourself.